Heraclius, Babur and Margaret were just released in-game, revealing the full details for their skills. And there are some big implications for the meta in Rise of Kingdoms, in particular on Heraclius, and huge implications for the future of the formation system, visible from his skills alone. So stick around in this video for a breakdown of the new Mighty Shield mechanic, the skills on these commanders, and whether or not I think they're going to be meta. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and today's video is sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And although the revealing of skills on commanders seems like a pretty simple thing, there's actually huge conclusions we can draw about the future of Rise of Kingdoms based on the skills on these commanders, especially from Heraclius and the future of the formation system. So in this video, you should use the timestamps to navigate to whichever portion of the video you're most interested in, or kick back, grab some popcorn, and enjoy from start to finish, because Chisgule Gaming's got some bombs to drop. Let's start with Heraclius, and why am I saying, hey, this is a huge indicator about the direction of Rise of Kingdoms, and the reason is very simple. Shields and shielding effects are far more powerful, and as you'll see, as I'll explain, they have added new shield mechanics that are going to make it so that the hollow square formation, which enhances shielding effects, is going to be extremely powerful. Now you may be thinking, whoa, Chisgule, I don't even know what this commander does. Let me start with what he does, and then I will get to that conclusion, and I'll bring you along with me to how I got there. So first, Heraclius. Wow. 2,400 combined factor. 1,200 into damage, 1,200 into a shield. The damage is area of effect and is really small. And let me tell you something that's very strange about shielding, which is that it's not a far cry from healing. You see, shielding is preventing you from taking damage, and that's nice. That's good, okay? However, it's still effectively making it so that you have more troops available in your garrison. And when you have more troops available in your garrison, it's true, you deal more damage. But alternatively, just like with healing, you could just take the damage and put more troops into your garrison, and then you had the same amount of troops in total, and instead you could have been doing damage to the enemy. So it's a little bit weird because you're mitigating the damage of the enemy, and it's better than a heal, that's for sure, no doubt about it. But it's not as straightforward as just doing damage to your enemy, which we know is just straight up value. Now, where is shielding extremely good? Oh, I don't know. How about Ark of Osiris? How about Kingsland, where you really don't want your flags to burn? You want to prolong a fight? Shielding does have a role in the game, and that role is only going to increase. Again, we'll get to why I think that's the case. From here, second skill, 30% health is wicked. That is a lot of health. It's all troop types. This commander is going to be so good, potentially, for defending your city, okay? And what's weird about this commander is they've really complicated the language by having an extra effect when you're in your own city. If you are defending any old garrison, you get an upwards of 30% counterattack. But if you're in your city, you could have an upwards of 40%, which is kind of interesting. This is not a bonus on top of the counterattack damage boost that you get base. It's either you get 30%, or if you're in your city, you get 40%. That's the way that I'm interpreting this particular skill here. What I'm trying to say is that it is better for defending your city than not, but like barely. Okay, from here, next skill. Increase the skill damage of this troop's commanders by 20%. You know, people were speculating, what if he's like an E-Song? And it's an interesting idea, but 20% is Sun Tzu levels of damage boost. It's not E-Song levels of skill damage boost. It's not Nevsky levels of skill damage boost, but there's more. When they use an active skill, their troop gains a mighty shield. That's 400 factor if you're in a regular garrison, 500 factor if you're in your city. I mean, the developers, you know, they're giving this commander a boost in your city, but it's very small. I mean, very, very, very small, okay? Like a 25% boost to this particular shield when you're in your city. Let's keep reading, but there is a weirdness here about shielding, and I'll explain it in a second. From here, increase the defense by 15% and attack by 15% if you're in a stronghold or a city. Well, it doesn't work in the field. And when their troop is attacked while you have a shield active, there's a 30% chance to deal direct damage to the attacking troop of 1,000 factor. This effect can trigger once every 8 seconds. Now, I really like this, but you got to keep in mind that shielding effects in this game have historically not lasted long. In fact, we'll talk about how they work in just a second. I'm like, can't wait to jump the gun here. Final skill, expertise. Take 10% less damage from normal attacks, and if this commander's troop contains at least 3 troop types, damage taken is reduced by an extra 20%. I assume that is counterattack damage taken is reduced by an extra 20%. So in other words, that's 10% less damage from normal attacks or 30% less damage from normal attacks if you have 3 troop types, basically if you're defending your city. Or you have a mixed troop garrison, and that is a very mixed troop garrison, by the way. YSS only cares about 2 troop types. You have at least 2, you're good to go. Here we're saying you better have 3. 3 is harder to do. It's very achievable, but certainly harder. So, why is it that Chisgule is saying that there's these big implications about the meta? First of all, he is going to be a good commander, specifically for garrisons you want to hold for a long time. I may have mentioned this earlier, but we're talking about things like Ark of Osiris, very good. Kingsland, very good. For flags or potentially even a building fort, shielding effects are very, very, very good. Prolonging the length of the fight is exactly where you want to be. Also, he is going to be very, very difficult to swarm. You take 30% less normal attack damage, okay, and you have 30% more counterattack damage that you deal. Wow. I mean, you are going to be very difficult to swarm indeed. But how do these shields work? And what the heck is going on here? You see, normally with shields in this game, regular shielding effects will just replace each other, and whatever shield is strongest will work. So for example, we have commanders that have been doing shields for quite a while. If you have a lucky coin, you know, it's an accessory. It gives you like a 500 shield factor. Or let's say you have Skippy. Everybody should have Skippy. That gives you a shield factor as well. Okay, it's like 500 shielding factor. Well, if you have Skippy's shield trigger on the same turn as Charles Martel's shield, Charles Martel does a, what is it, 1,400? No, 1,200 damage factor shield. GG. The stronger shield will take effect, and the other shield is, to my understanding, completely wasted. So again, if you had a Skippy Prime shield, trigger at the same time as a Charles Martel shield, the Skippy Prime portion of the shielding would do nothing, and instead, this shield would take effect. But how the heck do mighty shields work on the new commander, and are they different? And now to get that answer, I actually reached out to the developers in-game through support chat. Right over here, the same place that anybody else could reach out to support chat. But before I show you that conversation, the question I had is, do these mighty shields differ from regular shields? And in what way? Can a mighty shield stack with another mighty shield? In other words, why is it that they would have 2 shielding effects that could trigger at the same time? It wouldn't make sense because you would, historically, based on the old rules for shielding, you'd only get one or the other. And you know, when you have a 500 factor shield and you have a 1,200 factor shield, the 1,200 factor shield would always preside, just like how we talked about with Martel and Skippy Prime. But are mighty shields different? And the answer was yes. Let me show you. So here's the question I asked. What's the difference between the mighty shield effect on Heraclius and the shield effects of other commanders? Can a mighty shield stack with a regular shield? Okay, and, you know, I wasn't sure if support would get back to me, but they actually got back to me really quickly. And they said, we've received your question. Please wait patiently. We'll let you know when we have the answer. And they came back with this. The strong shield, in other words, the mighty shield, and the original shield are independent of each other. So they're 2 different things. When the 2 exist at the same time, the original shield will be used to absorb the damage first. In other words, if there is a Skippy Prime shield, it will be used to absorb the damage first, before the Mighty Shield. But there's more. They say, note, the number of rounds of the Strong Shield will still be consumed with battle rounds. So if the remaining number of rounds on the original shield is 2, and then remaining rounds of the Strong Shield is 3, after the number of rounds of the original shield is completed, the Strong Shield will start to absorb the damage value. The number of remaining rounds is only 1 at this time. So they're basically saying that you can have a regular shield and a Mighty Shield at the same time. First, the regular shield is consumed, then the Mighty Shield is consumed. Let me go on to read more. When the number of rounds of the original shield ends, or the damage absorbed by the original shield reaches the maximum, the Mighty Shield, they call it a powerful shield, will take effect. So Mighty Shields and other shielding effects will stack, and that is very important. This is important on commanders like Sargon, Skippy Prime. It's relevant for commanders like Constantine. He says whenever you have a shielding effect, you take less skill damage. I don't know how that works with a Mighty Shield. Presumably there's synergy. But this was interesting, but I wasn't done yet. I wanted to know more. My next question is, hey, this is very helpful. Does the Mighty Shield on Heraclius, active skill, and the third skill stack with each other? So we know that a regular shield and a Mighty Shield can stack. And you consume the regular shield before the Mighty Shield becomes active. I am still left with one question about that, by the way, which is that if the shield is consumed, is the Mighty Shield consumed on the same turn, or does the Mighty Shield get consumed on the second turn? In other words, if I'm going to do 2,000 damage and my regular shield only shields 1,000 of it, are both the regular shield and the Mighty Shield consumed on that same turn, or on one turn is the regular shield consumed, and on the next turn, the Mighty Shield's consumed? Well, we're going to have to test and see how that works, but let's see here the answer to this question. Heraclius active skill and third skill, do they stack? And they came up with an answer, and they said the damage absorption value will be superimposed, and the number of rounds will not be superimposed. The number of rounds is the longest. In other words, these will be added to each other. Now, look, superimposed is a word that not everybody may know. And the thing is that when translations are happening, my interpretation of the word and understanding might be different than theirs. So let me read you the definition, which is that superimposed is placed or laid over something else, typically so that both things are still evident. In other words, what I think they're saying here is that Mighty Shields stack. They're superimposed. And whatever the longest duration was of the Mighty Shield, that becomes the new duration. Let me give you an example. If you have a Mighty Shield active that lasts 2 turns, and boom, you have a new Mighty Shield that is cast. If the duration of the new shield is 5 turns, then the duration of your shielding effect will be added on and extended, so now the duration is 5 turns. I think that's how that would go. In other words, shielding effects can be very strong in this game now, because instead of overwriting each other, the new Mighty Shields are designed to stack with each other. And that is very powerful indeed when we look at how you can make them even stronger. Let me show you. If you make your way into the formation system and smash into the codex, then scroll on down to the hollow square formation. This is where things get interesting. This is nerd science at work, everybody. The thing is that I made a video ages ago that said 2 very bold claims. Either the developers have completely overtuned the formation system because they have these formations with these effects that are very powerful that enhance the effective shield strength and enhances the effective shield strength. And there just aren't that many shields in the game. I said, what are the developers doing? Either they don't understand the meta of this game, or the developers are going to release things over time that make these formations that feel really niche and too focused and too specific to be relevant. They will make things that and put them into the game that make them super relevant. And we are in one of those moments. This is why I thought Man, this commander tells you big news about the future of the game, because hollow square formation suddenly gets a lot more interesting. Look, I get that this is, for some people, way over the top, but I like to look at the end game. I imagine you might like to look at the end game too, because you're now 15 minutes into a Chisgule Gaming video. By the way, if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing and throwing a like on the video. If you're this far into one of my videos, you must be getting value, and I've probably earned that like, so thank you for your support by smashing the like button. But let's talk about these end game inscriptions, the best of the best. In a hollow square formation, the base thing it does is reduces damage taken. Now that has the effect of making your shields last longer. The less damage you're taking, the more damage you can absorb. And that's not quite right. The clearer way of explaining that would be the more damage you mitigate, the more duration you can get out of your shields, right? So the first legendary inscription increases troop skill damage resistance. That's, I think, skill damage taken by 5%, and normal attacks have a 10% chance to increase your shield strength. Presumably that's regular shields and mighty shields. In addition, troops receive a 5% boost to shields. Damage taken while you have a shield is reduced by 10%. Aha. Crowned. Let's look at what that does. Troops receive a 5% boost to shields. Increase all damage dealt by 3% when you have a shield, 2% when not using a shield. And last but not least, rounded, increase troop damage resistance. I don't know why they call it damage resistance as opposed to damage taken, just like they say everywhere else in the game. I don't know why they're using different language. I may have to look into that. But damage resistance increased by 5%. Okay, well, this is really interesting. Why is that? The hollow square formation is going to, in the end game, dramatically reduce the damage you take and boost the damage mitigation, this shield strength that you're getting from shields. This is really powerful. I felt like hollow square didn't really have a logical place. You'd rather have some other formation on your garrison. But now, when you think about a garrison designed to be swarmed and crush the swarmers, Heraclius is looking really good. I would probably use hollow square with him, and I would try to get as much of this shield boosting damage mitigation stuff as I possibly could. And I would definitely use a lucky coin, because guess what? Shields stack, baby. And all of a sudden, lucky coin, which is something that people think is pretty miserable, except for Ark of Osiris, gets to be really interesting when commanders have extra shield synergies. The more you can push the synergies, the more insane something like Lucky Coin is going to be. 10% chance when you're attacked to gain a shield, which means when you're attacked by many things, you have a lot of shields triggering. So why is all of this super relevant? Because on Heraclius, you really want to pair with another commander that is either going to be giving you shields or benefit from having shields in some way. So this means commanders like YSS for Garrison could be really good. It could be that a leadership mixed garrison will be a thing. The only problem is equipment. That will be the downfall of that garrison. But a Heraclius YSS garrison could be a thing. Xeno Heraclius could be a thing. A Monitori Heraclius could be good. Jadwiga or Janziska with Heraclius could be very good. I think the potential for this commander and for mixed troop garrisons in the game is going to be really good, especially in situations where you really don't want your garrison to burn. Building flags, building forts, Kingsland, and Ark of Osiris are examples where I think Heraclius could really shine. Of course, testing will be necessary to really prove that. Consider subscribing, because I will probably expertise him the day he comes into the game so that we can test. And if I'm not the one expertising him, somebody else will, and I will live stream that testing as it happens. One last thing that's really important about Heraclius is that he's got the defense tree. And I don't think you want him to be the primary, because leadership equipment is just a real pain to work on, and then you're married to a certain troop type being the focus troop. And leadership defense garrison is something that we have seen before. In fact, our good old friend YSS, and Theodora, by the way, has the same combinations. And the thing I want to mention about that is that there's a lot of damage mitigation, and that's really good for the implications to your shielding-based effects. So, for example, I can mitigate my skill damage taken by 9%, my damage taken over here by 1.5%. If I wanted, I could get this talent, which would give me another 3% damage mitigation. There's talents over here, another 3% damage taken mitigation. I can make it so that I get defense on my active skills, not to mention the fact that the garrison tree is pretty freaking legit. We've got 6% damage mitigation over here, 15% skill damage taken mitigation, and also damage dealt boosted by 6%. Let me tell you, I think Heraclius is going to do cool stuff. I think so. I don't know for sure, but I feel pretty strongly that, first of all, he'll be meta, and that second of all, big implications for the formation system and shielding effects moving forward. Now, that said, there are also big implications for ranged combat with the release of the kits on these commanders. And we'll go over them very briefly, but my impression is that their kits are strong enough to be meta, but not so strong that they're broken. So I don't think everybody needs to move in on ranged commanders, but I do think a lot of people will benefit by moving in on ranged commanders and getting comfortable with the idea that they're going to have a tower somewhere. Now, towers could be used strategically to either protect a retreat at worst or aid an assault at best, but they are not very mobile. So let's look at their kits, and I think you'll be surprised at how much march speed you actually get from them here. Active skill on Margaret. For the next 3 seconds, ranged normal attacks deal 50% extra damage, and you deal 500 damage factor per second. She is the Frederick I of ranged commanders here, okay? From here, next skill, increase the attack of siege units by 20%, march speed by 20%, and 10% chance to increase your normal attack by 20%, can trigger every 5 seconds and last for 3. All right, cool. From here, in ranged mode, this commander's troops deal 20% extra skill damage, and when their troop deals skill damage, there's a 30% chance to reduce the march speed by 30% for 3 seconds. That can trigger once every 5. I really like that a ranged commander reduces the enemy's march speed, not to be on the receiving end of it. That sucks. But the thing you need to chase down one of these commanders is march speed, so that you can close the distance between them quickly. And the thing that this commander does is makes it harder to do. It's a good effect. From here, increase the attack of this commander's troops by 5%. Now, it says attack. I think that's a typo, because down here it says damage. And typically, damage, or I guess I should say typically boosts of that low amount of 5% are all damage, not attack. So I think this is 5% all damage boost, which is really, really good. All damage is insane. And ranged attacks from this commander's troop have a 10% chance to reduce the defense of the enemy by 40%. Yo, a 40% reduction done at range is insane. I feel like rallies will deal counterattack damage to you, so this is actually important. It's very good the developers made it now so that ranged attacks take counterattack damage, because it will probably hurt to hit a rally, but putting a 40% defense reduction onto a rally does seem very good. So ranged could be very good for that. Final skill. Increase the defense of this commander's siege units by 10%. And when taking damage, this commander's troop has a 10% chance to heal itself, 500 factor. So look, I originally said that I thought all the defensive stats on your ranged commanders were nonsense, because theoretically you should get in position, you should be in a good position the enemy can't really attack, and you should wreck them from afar. But now that your units take counterattack damage, in other words, ranged commanders take counterattack damage from the targets they're hitting, all of a sudden the defensive stats on these commanders are very good. They're really high value. Not as high value as attack is in my estimation, but still really good. So I think Margaret is going to be strong. Support tree, I think, is also really good. Reduces the skill damage you take. Not as important, but good rage generation there. And then Babur with the attack tree. Let's look at his skills. He is, by the way, from the Wheel of Fortune. Margaret comes from an event. Deals skill damage to the target. 2,000 damage factor. And that's really good. Reduced by 50% if not within melee range, however, of the target. That's really confusing, isn't it? Wait a minute. Deals skill damage to a target troop 2,000 damage factor, but reduced by 50% if not within melee range of the target? So he's only doing 1,000 damage factor when you're using him at range? That's weird. That actually seems kind of weak, but let's continue on. Increase the attack of this commander's siege by 15%, defense by 15%. Commander's troop deals 10% more ranged normal attack damage from here. In range mode, this commander takes 10% less damage from normal attacks. Ranged normal attacks from this commander's troop have a 10% chance to deal additional skill damage, 500 factor, to the target. This effect can trigger once every 5. I like effects like that. Increase the health of this commander's siege by 20%. When taking damage, this commander's siege units have a 10% chance to gain 40% defense and 5% damage for 3 seconds. Do you know what's funny about this? Is that before the world in which counterattack damage would trigger from a ranged attack, this skill wouldn't do much for you until the enemy was already on top of you. But now this skill is insanely good, because you're going to be taking counterattack damage. That counterattack damage should theoretically give you that 10% chance to gain 40% defense and boost your damage by 5%. It actually seems really good. Very good synergy. And this, by the way, is a very strong skill, the expertise. Increase the attack of this commander's siege units by 10. Whenever they use an active skill, however, their troop will gain 50 rage per second for 3 seconds. Whew. I mean, I love effects like that, man. I love effects like that, especially because this commander is an attack tree commander. They don't have ways to gain rage from rejuvenate, so this is really good. In fact, weirdly enough, when you look at the amount of rage you could gain from the support tree, this is really weird because you don't actually get a ton of benefit from the rage per second from Babur, right? So let me explain that. If you used Margaret as the primary, and maybe this means you won't use her as the primary, but if you did, hypothetically, we got to look over here at a support tree commander. Let's look at Constantine. This skill is maxed 150 rage. All right, well, your normal attacks plus your rage you get from rejuvenate is already going to make it so that you're getting the sort of maximum amount of rage in that turn. So you're going to have some over rage from the expertise on Babur if you use Margaret as the primary. And, you know, you're either going to use Babur or Margaret as primary, or you'll split them and have both of them be primaries because you want to double your number of ranged commanders. That's reasonable, honestly. Anyways, I think that these commanders are strong. I don't think they're overpowered. And so I don't think you need to lose your mind over them. If you've got a, murder ball already configured, like I do, like you probably do, you don't have to worry about, deleting a bunch of equipment to put one of these in your lineup, one ranged march. However, I think ranged marches are going to be good. And I think they're going to have a strong impact. And I think they're going to have an especially strong impact in smaller kingdoms and smaller KVKs. I think the bigger the KVK, the harder it's going to be to effectively use siege units, because big kingdoms are much better about grouping up and then dominating a location rather than small skirmishes here and there, where these guys I think are really going to shine. So all in all, I think there are really interesting implications about the future of the game. I think that each of the formations is going to eventually have a strong home. And for now, it looks like mighty shielding with infantry could get really spicy. But if you've got thoughts on how Heraclius is going to change the meta, definitely let me know down below in the comments. And you're like 30 minutes into a Chisgule gaming video, so if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, consider subscribing and doing me that huge favor of throwing a like on the video. Of course, if you're looking for some other entertainment around Heraclius and also the formation system, I'll have cards in the end screen in just a second to give you important information about ranged combat and also the formation system.